So welcome everyone to our third installation of the Spirit of the Black Men's Gathering, hosted by Green Acre, a Baha'i Center of Learning. You all probably know this, but in case you don't, oh, there goes my alarm. Green Acre is located in Elliott, Maine, which is the homeland of the Wabanaki people. We've been having conversations centered on nobility, spirituality, oneness, race for over 100 years. Green Acre is now also located in your living room, thanks to COVID. And we're actually grateful in a way because now these conversations are extended to so many more of us. So this series of conversations around the Spirit of the Black Men's Gathering is part of the discourse spaces which are surrounding Green Acre's current art show, Pupil of the Eye, centered on people of African descent. You can actually go to Green Acre's website, greenacre.news, to see the art. It's beautifully stunning. And these last 3 days, it has really been Green Acre, our staff, the staff here, our honor and privilege to host these spiritually influential, heart-opening, community-enriching conversations. You know, it's really clear that countless souls and the Baha'i community in general has been profoundly enriched in the past and the present by these gatherings, and the spirit of the gathering, the spirit of the gathering really, it's clear that it lives on in the influence of its participants to this day. And I think history may tell us in the future of the wider extent of this gathering's influence on the country and the world. So just a couple logistics. At the end of this presentation, which should last about an hour and a half, we will have time for Q&A. You'll see the chat box, which is located in the lower right-hand corner of your screen. Feel free to comment away and talk to each other. And if you have a specific question, please put it in the Q&A box. If you move your cursor down to the bottom of your screen, you'll see some icons pop up. One of them is Q&A. Click on there, put your question in there. If you can avoid putting in the chat box, it can easily get lost in there because the stream of comments just keeps coming. And please also, when you put in your question, let me know, just type there, if you want to ask it yourself or if you would like me to ask it on your behalf. And I believe that's all. And so I'll pass it over to Dr. Roberts.
Thank you very much. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another day with us. We hope that these last couple of days have been stimulating and you've had a chance to get a sense of the spirit of the Black Men's Gathering. And we hope and pray that the Spirit has touched your hearts and that there's an opportunity to learn from our experience. And we hope that those lessons will go on to sort of encourage and support the community. I understand that this Pupil of the Eye series is continuing from Green Acre. And so I'd like to share something with you and offer it to Green Acre that they might continue to use it, especially during this series. So please sit back and enjoy this piece of music created by Lacan Parsons and Jacinta Parsons, and it's on one of the BMG CDs. Jacinta Parsons and Lacan Parsons.
Pupil of the eye, the source of our vision, teachings of a holy man who spoke to us from prison. Pupil of the eye, the Creator's gift of sight, a gift for all humanity, seekers of the light.
There are so many things we say that influence the mind. those hidden little messages that are so hard to find. To show just one example, let's talk about a color. How black is shown as negative in one way or another. Of course, we know that's not the case when we refer to white. In fact, we use the color white to represent what's right. But those of us that have a tone that's of a darker hue see blackness in a different light. Another point.
Pupil of the eye, the source of our vision, teachings of a holy man who spoke to us from prison. Pupil of the eye, the Creator's gift of sight, a gift for all humanity, seekers of the light. Sounds that enter through the ear, melodies of old, orchestrating different notes to touch and soothe the soul. A symphony of music, creating harmony, appreciating differences with its diversity. A special walk, that soulful talk, flavored with pizzazz. Innovative music, just listen to some jazz. Reggae, hip-hop, samba, and don't forget the blues. Ways to find expression, years paying dues. Pupil of the eye, the source of our vision, teachings of a holy man who spoke to us from prison. Pupil of the eye, the Creator's gift of sight, a gift for all humanity, seekers of the light.
The queen of class and dignity, Oprah, seen and heard. America's classical music, from Duke, Diz, and Bird. International leadership with strength, yet always calm. Promoting peace and unity, Mr. Kofi Annan. Uplifting words that touch your heart, from Maya Angelou. A pioneer in medicine, Dr. Charles Drew. Arthur Ashe and Jim Brown speaking out, they weren't afraid. Marva Collins and Bill Cosby helping youth to make great.
Pupil of the eye, the source of our vision, teachings of a holy man who spoke to us from prison. Pupil of the eye, the Creator's gift of sight, a gift for all humanity, seekers of the light. Malcolm, Martin, Mandela, standards for the world, to make this earth a better place for every boy and girl. Beige, and brown, and black, and white, a variety of colors. Yet one human family, all sisters and brothers, bearing burdens from the past, enslaved and sometimes sold, enduring untold horrors while survival was the goal. But darkness equals mystery, a search for the unknown. Seeking spirituality, we know we're not alone.
The earth's human garden we see before our eyes. representing unity, if we only realize.
But as we care for flowers, so none will be neglected. Humanity is much the same. We all must be respected. Pupil of the eye, the source of our vision. Teachings of a holy man who spoke to us from prison. Pupil of the eye, the creator's gift of sight. A gift for all humanity, seekers of the light. Yes, we're seekers of the light. Seekers of the light. Well, how will I? Well, how will I? Well, how will I? World unity is what we need for you and me. But how
Again, that was Jacinta and Lacan Parsons, their song, The Pupil of the Eye. Well, friends, these last two sessions have been pretty invigorating, and we're happy to be with you again today. This is our final session. And I thought that I would start by sharing this quotation, reading these two paragraphs from a recent message of the Universal House of Justice dated July 22nd. It's the final two paragraphs in that message. And for those of you who don't have access to it, you can easily Google it and get it online. It's a pretty powerful message addressed to the American Baha'i community. And I quote, "Ultimately, the power to transform the world is effected by love. Love originating from the relationship with the divine. Love ablaze among the members of a community. Love extended without restriction to every human being. This divine love, ignited by the word of God, is disseminated by enkindled souls through intimate conversations that create new susceptibilities in human hearts, open minds to moral persuasion, and loosen the hold of biased norms and social systems so that they can gradually take on a new form in keeping with the requirements of humanity's age of maturity. You are channels for this divine love. Let it flow through you to all who cross your path. Infuse it into every neighborhood and social space in which you move to build capacity to canalize the society-building power of Baha'u'llah's revelation. There can be no rest until the destined outcome is achieved. Ahead of you lies times of trial and promise, of hardship and progress, of anguish and joy. Under all conditions, the Master, Abdu'l-Baha, is your solace and support. For those who aspire to lasting change, his example guides the way. Tactful and wise in his approach, penetrating in utterance, indiscriminating in fellowship, unfailing in sympathy for the downtrodden, courageous in conduct, persevering in action, imperturbable in the face of tests, unwavering in his keen sense of justice. And to all who arise to emulate him, he offers this unfailing assurance: that which is confirmed is the oneness of the world of humanity. Every soul who serveth this oneness will undoubtedly be assisted and confirmed. I hope you each will get this message and reflect on those two paragraphs. Today, we have a session entitled Community Builders. And these men of the gathering each have examples of the spirit in which they have taken the messages of the House of Justice, the experience of the gathering, and applied it practically to circumstances in the larger society. And so I welcome you to hear first from Teddy Lawrence, who's an educator and an entrepreneur, and Juan Pacheco, who's an actor, both stage as well as film, who come from the city of Los Angeles. Teddy and Lawrence, please.
So like Billy said, Juan and I coming to you from Los Angeles, and we live in the same neighborhood. So we're gonna tag team this presentation. But I'm gonna start, and you can hear me clearly, right?
Yes.
So the gathering has meant a lot to me, and I remember years ago Billy asked, why did we go? And I remarked that I didn't know why I went, because the type of person that I am, the personality that I've developed in my life is that I'm hesitant to engage in spaces where a spotlight might be put on me. So it's always difficult for me to go to those spaces, and the gathering in that sense was no different. But I realized that I went back. I kept going back because my soul was prompting me to go back. And I can't attribute it to anything else, because when I went, I was inspired, and I feel like I was a source of inspiration. I feel like I learned how to spread love, and I learned what love can look like in this world. I felt like I was validated, and I felt like I validated others. I learned another way to pray. I've forgotten, I'd grown up in the church, but I've forgotten about the way that Black folks engage in worship, because there just weren't a lot of Black Baha'is around. And so I felt this sense of validation, and it helped me to rededicate myself to my faith, my family, and my profession. And one thing Billy remarked one time that suggested that, if we're not appearing on committees in the faith and so forth, then maybe we're not making ourselves visible. And that really, really resonated with me. And so I just had to get beyond those barriers that prevented me from serving, not in an egotistical way, but in a really practical, if people aren't seeing you, then you aren't making yourself visible. So the gathering really did a lot for my dedication to Baha'u'llah. And so taking that experience to my family, we just centered all of our activities around the core activities of the faith. Devotional gatherings, children's classes, junior youth groups, study circles. And everything that we did and our community did was family oriented. So we began this most recent journey in an apartment complex, huge apartment complex, 11,000 residents, called Park La Brea. And upon reflection, it seems like that experience was sort of an incubator for what we're doing today. We centered everything around prayer and action and reflection, and we saw growth as a result of that. We had different families move in. We moved in. Juan and his family, the Pachecos, moved in. The Riveras moved in. And because in that community, we couldn't go door to door, we weren't allowed to. So using, again, prayer, action, and reflection, we decided to just engage those who we were close to in that community and friends and family. And so we used that foundation to start our devotional gatherings, which were really the foundation of everything that we did. We always had the devotional gathering, and we started children's classes, had junior youth groups, and so that was a model that we developed during that time. And it wasn't anything new. It was just what we had to use given our circumstances. So during that time, before things were decentralized in Los Angeles, we would go to the Baha'i Center for gatherings, and Gene Andrews, when he was a counselor, I remember seeing him at least one time, probably a couple times, where he came and urged people in the Black community or Black Baha'is to teach in the Black community. And that never, ever left me. So when it was time for us to kind of, when we felt like we outgrew Park La Brea, we were really laser focused on the Black community. And so we decided to pick up and just dive in. So there was a community that was being cultivated by beautiful Baha'i Stephanie Jeffries. And it turned out that she was praying that she would get some assistance in her community. And when she learned that we were interested in moving to a Black neighborhood, she was all over us. And if you know Stephanie, you know that I mean that literally she was on us. And so I think with the help of folks in the world beyond, like Truett White, who was a blessed soul, blessed Baha'i, with his assistance and as well as others, things just started to line up. Homes that we really, I don't know if I should say we had no business getting, but things just didn't seem like they were going to worked out. And so we moved into View Heights community, which is a really, really wonderful, loving, warm community. And we started to do the work. And then Juan and his family moved in, and then the Riveras, Juan's sister, they moved in, and some friends of the faith who lived next door to us in Park La Brea. Again, everything just lined up. The house right next door to us over here in View Heights came up for sale, and we told them things didn't look good. It didn't look like it was going to happen. And then in the 11th hour, it worked out. And so they moved next door, and we were actually co-hosting a devotional gathering with them in Park La Brea, and that just continued here. So it's really been a magical journey. We went from I think Stephanie said there were maybe 2 or 3 core activities happening here. Now we have over 35 core activities happening, and it's just really about just dedication to Baha'u'llah. But one thing that we have learned, again, with the promptings of one of our counselors, Counselor Sasan, is that we held on to the same model that we had in Park La Brea, that we couldn't go door to door, that we couldn't really engage our neighbors like we wanted to. And then Mark Sasan reminded us that we needed to break out of that comfort zone that we had developed. We were still just engaging our friends and family and their associates. And so we realized that we needed to expand the way that we community built. Is that what it is? And start to really engage our community. So that's what we're in the process of doing now. And we'll see what happens. We'll check back in, tell you what happens. And I'll hand off to Juan.
Thank you, Teddy. So I guess we're tag teaming this, sharing when it comes to our efforts here in View Heights. And as Teddy mentioned, there are the core team of us is 4 households, 4 families. Teddy's family, the Lawrences, my family, the Pachecos, the Riveras, as you heard mentioned, and Stephanie Jeffries' home and the Jeffries family. And it reminds me that, when we got the letter that the BMG was to take on a new form, to leave that sacred safety of our annual gathering at Acre, there were myself and as Teddy alluded to, Uncle Truett White, who has since passed on. We arranged a van of brothers to go up to study this letter, and in that van were the 4 were Teddy, myself, Uncle Truett, and a few other individuals, one of which is Stephanie's husband, William Jeffries. There was a dozen of us. And at that time, not knowing Los Angeles, but you can wrap your mind around any metropolitan city. You have a downtown, you have an east side, you have a west side, you have a south side. And those are very, in LA, it could be 5 miles and it could be a 5-hour commute. So we were all spread out. And at that time, I was looking to purchase a home. And Uncle Truett, in his second or third career, started doing real estate. So he was helping me out, and I was trying to get a little further south. Well, anyhow, we consult on this letter. We shed our tears and come up with our plans, and we formulate our plans. And we go about our lives. Uncle Teddy starts doing his efforts, and we try to go and support, and we're doing our efforts in our neighborhood. And what happens over a period of time, we all were, we would check in periodically. Well, to fast forward a little, Uncle Truett passes away. But before he passed away, he, unbeknownst to me, had taken my sister under his wing and started teaching her the Baha'i faith at a restaurant on a weekly basis for about 3 or 4 months. And they would close out this restaurant. And my sister tells me that he passed away in January of 2014. And about 4 months later, she declared. So he was unable to share in that joy, at least here. But one of the sisters yesterday asked, where are the Black men? Where are the Black men of the BMG? That the communities have asked this question. And I want to highlight the efforts of Truett White, that although he's not here physically, after his passing, a few months later, my sister had the opportunity to purchase the house he grew up in, the house he discovered the faith in, that she lives in now, which is a 7-minute drive from Teddy Lawrence. I started to pray, at his resting place and at the resting place of the first Baha'i in Los Angeles, Thornton Chase. And I asked him, we were told that people in the next world we can go to, for assistance and with the things that were their strengths. Well, I said, Uncle Truett was doing real estate. I'm going to ask him to be my real estate agent from the next world. And sure enough, I close on my house within a 21-day escrow, unheard of in Los Angeles. I got my offer accepted. Teddy gets his offer accepted. My sister finds a house. Teddy's neighbor gets his house. None of us without a hiccup. And now these 4 individuals that were on a van spread out across the city. I live 500 feet away from Teddy now. My sister lives 7 minutes away, you know, in a house that Uncle Truett grew up in. And and William Jeffries lives 500 feet from Teddy Lawrence. So it's as if since his passing, Uncle Truett, one of our friends in our community said he wasn't that good at real estate in this world, but he's crushing it from the next world. He's brokering deals left and right. So when I think about where the brothers are now, they're some of those things are intangible. Some of those things might be mystical. Some of those efforts and the rewards, I like to think about it as compounding interest. You know, you put something aside and over time you look up and it might not even make sense. The amount of bounty you can reap from these initial seeds that have been planted. And the woman he taught, my sister, she far surpassed me when it comes to my efforts. She is the glue. She is the one that's dispatching work. She's the one we had a reflection gathering, you know, just a couple days ago. She is spearheading this movement in the home that Uncle Truett grew up in. And there is no doubt in my mind that his work, his love, the love and his faithful service that he, you know, contributed here is continuing to reap benefits, you know, for our community, you know. And, you know, when it comes to the actual activities that we're now engaged in, as Teddy said, we had 2. And in a matter of, how long have you been living there, Teddy? 3 years? Maybe just under, yeah, 3 years and some change. We went, he you know, I'm going to call him out because he sold us short. He said 35. We actually have 45, you know, core activities. And it ain't about a numbers thing. It's about just showing the possibility when you have a core group of individuals, small, 4 households that are focused, that come together, that even if we have individual initiatives and individual goals, individual teaching plans, that when we come together, we share those goals. We share what we're doing in the field of service. And then without hesitation, we say, how can we support one another? So I want to transition to someone asked yesterday, what are we doing to have other men experience this, which you've heard all weekend about this love that was fostered at the BMG, this humility, this focus on service. So Teddy and I were talking a few months ago about wanting to open up space for men to be able to have conversations of the heart. And we wanted it to have a devotional component. We wanted there to be prayers, but we didn't want it to only be limited, not that there's any limitation, but not limited only to Baha'is. We wanted it to be open to men of all faiths. So we teamed up with another brother on the East Coast. Once the pandemic hit, we said, you know what? Our focus should be in our neighborhood, but now our neighborhood, thanks to Zoom, is global. So this brother in DC said, hey man, let's get this prayer. You know, I attended this interfaith devotional where we pick a topic and we go in as men and we hit it from all angles. And I said, okay. So Teddy and I, you know, thought of a few brothers, and it started off with maybe 4 or 5 of us the first meeting. And we said some prayers and we looked at some religious texts that had to do with service. And we just consulted about it, and we went back and we said, okay, how was that? So I checked in with all the brothers that attended. How was that for you? You know, it was this process we're asked to, you know, consult, to take action, to reflect, right? And so we did it. We went through the playbook. Okay, we're going to consult, we're going to take some action, and we're going to reflect on that action and then let it inform our next meeting. So this has proceeded. So this happened about 3 more weeks. And then we had one of the, you know, brothers who lost his life, you know, at the hands of police brutality. And, you know, we had something on the agenda that we were going to discuss that week. And we said, let's, you know, shelve all that And let's just open up the space and see how brothers are responding to this. How are they interacting with this? You know, let's say some prayers for his soul, and also just open up the space. So we did this, and then the very next week, Ahmaud Arbery lost his life, and we did the same thing. And now what we started to see is that this group grew from 5 to 6. At the most, we've had like 21 brothers on the call, all over the nation. And what it has become is the space for men to come together, to interact and be inspired by the word of God, and also to have conversations of the heart on relevant subjects and things that are happening in our everyday lives. And it's, you know, I got a text message from one of the brothers who was a Christian friend of mine, who came to my mind when I was thinking of this. And he said, I want to thank you for being an obedient servant. This group has gotten me through a pandemic, a social uprising, and has contributed to the advancement of my career. Just creating this space for men to build, to pray together, to have discussion together. And, you know, the way that it was formed, when I think about any core team, any teaching endeavor, the way it was formed was a thought and something that was very exciting, that Teddy and I got excited about, and we tried it and we reflected. And now it has started to morph to the point where now the group has its own identity. But we kind of sat back and let's see how the brothers run with this. What conversations do they want to have? Now we're having conversations about intimacy. We're having conversations about marriage. We're having conversations that other than a barbershop, and it's usually lower natured when we're talking about these things at the barbershop. But that's the most intimate conversation I ever had growing up, was at the barbershop, you know, and now we're having it in an elevated space where everyone knows that anyone's opinion is heard and valued and appreciated. And we leave all our titles, like, you know, Dr. Derek Smith mentioned, we leave all that at the door, and we just come in and be there with one another. Now, the special thing about this is, although this is an individual initiative, I brought this to our group, to our neighborhood. Our neighborhood gets together to reflect on what we're doing. And they asked us to share. And I shared that this week about what we've been doing. And one of the, actually Stephanie Jeffries said, well, how can we get young people in here? She likes to, you know, hold on, let me, you know, how is this in line with what we're supposed to be doing? How are we gonna get young people in there? And we've been trying to identify a service component. You know, our next step is, okay, we're praying, we're coming together. How do we now go into the field of service, especially during the pandemic? So one of the ideas that we tossed out that, you know, Teddy and I are going to present to our group is, can we identify young men in our lives right now that could benefit from this group? Can we accompany them and seeing what conversations they want to have so that they can help facilitate, you know, a similar space, so that if they're entering, you know, this time when they have to think about chastity, can we have a group of men support them in that discussion? You know, can we have, you know, and what we started to see is that our activity now, my wife is like, oh, I want to do that with my girls, you know. And you know, what we said is like, my wife is in about 7 different groups of women that have different, you know, she has her artist group, and she has her, you know, her weavers for a new world, and she had, you know, and that's my alarm. Teddy cut into my time. No. But what we're starting to see is that our individual initiative, when we bring it to and offer it to our group and consult with our group, that they are also able to enrich our experiences, offer up suggestions, and see how we can integrate it into our very community life. So one other component to this is, we want to now that we've across the nation, we want to start to encourage brothers that live near each other to do this for their neighborhood, so that when you leave your house, you can see the brother that just last night you were having this discussion with, that you can see the man who was praying with you, you know, and holding your hand, you know, the power of that. Now, you know, we have about 5 brothers in our in Teddy and I's neighborhood that have taken part in this. And those bonds are starting to form. And now two brothers on the East Coast happen to be in the same city, and they had a social distancing meetup on a stoop in Brooklyn. And these two cats couldn't be more different. You know, I have, you know, one is like this artist, and one is like, you know, I told him if there was different sects in the Baha'i faith, he'd be the nation of Baha'u'llah. Like he's a militant, like let's take over the world type, you know, and the other is let's see beauty in all things type, and more laid back, and let's paint together, you know. And it's beautiful to see that the thing that connects them is love and love for Baha'u'llah. And so in addition to all these activities, you know, we mentioned 45 of these core activities, most of them of which are devotionals. We have children's classes, and they're all working alongside one another. So in our neighborhood community, we identified a new family that had two kids. We went on a walk with them. And by the, hey, let's have a social distance walk. The neighborhood, the kids need to get this energy out. We did this. And by the end of the walk, he was invited to our men's group that Teddy and I have, and their kids were invited to our children's class that we had started this weekend. You know, we started the weekend following our walk, and they attended. So now so once you have this stuff set in motion, it just becomes easy to, in natural conversation, and be like, hey man, we having this children's class about the spiritual education of kids. You think your kids will benefit from that? Come check it out. He was like, sure, why not? So we had a social distancing children's class, you know, a few weeks ago. So it just shows how, you know, it might sound like, oh, this is just easy, it's just happening. But this is, you know, a process that started in Park La Brea some eight odd years ago. And now we're starting to reap the benefit of that. And to see that these opportunities have just become more and more readily available to us. So I want to just end with one quote that Albert Einstein said, "The world that we have created is a process of our thinking. It cannot be changed without changing our thinking." So basically, the reality that we see, the world that we have manifested, is a direct result of our thinking. And the Universal House of Justice has asked us to have a revolutionary reimagining of things, that our thinking must change, that we have to see God in everyone, that we have to love our neighbors, you know, that we have to, what we were afforded in the sanctity of the space at Green Acre, that we need to bring that in our home, and we need to bring that to our community. And I'm honored that I'm able to do it alongside Teddy and the brothers, you know, that have paved the way for us. We're standing on their shoulders, you know, and I dedicate all of my service really to Uncle Truett White, amongst other people. But he continues to fuel and inspire me on a daily. And I also, in my artistic endeavors, I turn to Brother Jimmy Collins, who passed away. Whenever I'm having any struggles in my arts, I turn to him, and I feel their presence. I really do feel that they have uplifted me in very, very key moments of my life. So thank you, Uncle Billy, for the space, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to share with everyone. Aloha.
Thank you both so much. Thank you both so much. Just another word, you know, Abdu'l-Baha said, the reality of man is his thought. And without changing our thinking, we don't change anything. So friends, thank you so much for telling us a little bit about your project. I'm sure there will be questions that will come to you later. But now let's turn our attention to this brother from Boston. His name is Kevin Andrews, and he's the charter school founder and administrator, the neighborhood charter school. It was his brainchild, and from inception, he built an extraordinary school, and he's also an academic advocate. So Kevin Andrews, welcome, please.
Well, thank you, Billy. First, I want to thank you for the introduction, but I want to frame the introduction a little bit differently. as you've heard through this conversation, you've heard of Gene Andrews, counselor, served at the center. You've heard maybe of Dennis Andrews, who's now on the board of Hakuk. And of course, you've heard of PJ Andrews, my son, who served at the center and who is an auxiliary board member. And so if this introduction was at the Black Men's Gathering, what would I be? Chopped liver? And the brothers, as you can see them smiling, would be shaking their head saying, yeah, that's about right. You chopped liver. You ain't much more than that. Yeah, that's good. That's good. See, Jason, everybody agreeing. So just to get you a little sense of into the gathering, what really happens behind those doors. But it's all in jest. And I love the brothers. I just love the brothers. I think before I get into what I've done, we need to call out some of the things that have happened this weekend. Derek Smith I knew him when he first came to the gathering, and basically a kid and grew up. You look at Teddy, you look at Juan, these are young little punky kids, and now they're all got gray hair and doing all kinds of special things and just really wonderful souls. They were wonderful souls then, they've become more wonderful souls. I mean, there's Billy, there's Patrick, there's Harvey and Nassif and Bruce and Carl and Jamie and Walter and Dennis and Al and Shaheen. Everybody this weekend was just really special, really, really special. And I'm glad Juan called out Jimmy Collins. Jimmy Collins was one of my roommates at Green Acre, a very special soul. And Jimmy is one of the reasons why we have so much arts in the school that I'm about to talk about. But before we get there, and Ted Jefferson, can't forget Ted Jefferson, another soul, kind of grumpy, but boy, when he knew you were doing something great, he knew it. I remember him visiting my dad's farm as a black man. He said, how can this black man own us? This is so, he said, tears came to his eyes to see this amazing thing happen. And Teddy went through so much through his life. So I just really want to call out those things. I want to say that the Black Men's Gathering for me was those little things, those very little things that would come out of the gathering. Those are the things that were special to me. Billy used to say, you know, we may not all be singers, but we can sing. And we would sing, you know, and we would pray. We'd pray so deeply. It would be very special. And the gathering was not just full of excitement and energy. It was fuel and survival for all of us for the coming year. That's what it was. The gathering wasn't just a week, it was a year. Because you could call on the brothers throughout the year to get assistance. And it wouldn't even need to be anything issued. You just pick up the phone. You just, hey, how you doing? Love you, brother. Be quick. It'd be over. But you knew that somebody was there for you. I just think it's important that we remember that and that people understand that the gathering was much more than that. And, it took me a long while to figure out the direction of what I wanted to go. I was a leader in an affluent community in a place called Brookline and Newton, affluent communities, prestigious communities, where the schools were very special. And, I was a young, 9-year-old principal, thinking I'm all that and everything. And, I know, and Billy called and said, man, why don't you come to the gathering in South Carolina? I said, I'm busy, man, maybe. And he knew what that meant. He knew you ain't gonna show up. He called again, and finally called, and I said, okay, I'll come. And I got on a van, and we took this van from the airport, and long ride, and I grew up on a farm, but I'd never seen tobacco fields. And I get in there, and I remember I was in the van with Carl Morrell from the Bronx. Carl didn't say much. I guess we were all kind of nervous and uptight. This was our first gathering. And you get there, and I remember Jillian Collins saying, we shouldn't be here, we should be doing this, and blah, blah. By the end of that session, the man had transformed into the #1 believer of the Black Men's Gathering. And then his art, you can't really see it, but behind me is some of his art that he would present at every gathering. He'd have these very special buttons that we would wear, and I'd always try to get some of his art, and we'd have an auction. I've always made sure I brought enough money so I'd win that, try to win that prize. It was like a real good thing for me to have. Just a very special brother in that way. And so the gathering went from that, and Billy talked about, how we'd end at 9 o'clock. One of the brothers said in Green Acre, something happened to Billy going from South Carolina to Green Acre. Because when we were in South Carolina, if you went to bed at 1 o'clock, you went to bed early. We'd be out there talking and discussing. And Billy had said something about people inquiring, what are you talking about? Like, what are you talking about? No, we were talking about God. We were talking about God. We were talking about Baha'u'llah. We were talking about the mission. We were talking about the role we needed to play in our communities. That's what we were talking about, as Juan and Teddy so eloquently expressed in what they are doing within their community. Something special. Giving back. Because, as far as I'm concerned, a lot of us, we got ours. It's important to us to give back. And so, in one way, I decided that then there was this opportunity for me to start a school in Dorchester, Massachusetts, not too far from Billy's neighborhood, Roxbury. This school was primarily for African-American children, about 70-75%. School from pre-K to 8th grade at the time. We started out with 51 kids and little kindergarten, first and second graders. We grew to a preschool through 400 kids, built a brand new $21 million building. But then what I needed was, that was the material piece. The gathering was the material piece. The school was the material piece of the gathering. What I needed was the spiritual piece. And that's what the Black Men Gathering had done. And like I said, it was these little things, these conversations late at night, or listening to the words of the Universal House of Justice or of Abdu'l-Baha. And as we look at the picture of Green Acre of Abdu'l-Baha in the auditorium there, as he asked us, we say, that is the example. I would think and I would look, how am I going to do something special to give back to the faith? And so I said, the writings, the Universal House of Justice, Abdu'l-Baha, Baha'u'llah, the Bab, have given us the playbook. All I needed to do was call the plays and execute. That's all I had to do. There's the playbook. I call a play, execute. And so we decided to design a school, a full service school, where there'd be education, of course. Our job was to make kids smart. But then our next job was to make sure that they were healthy. So we decided to have healthcare was important. Physical healthcare, mental health, and then social services. A special emphasis on the arts. All of this came together. It became a very special school. We did well academically. At one point, we had over 3,000 kids on our waiting list. I'm very proud of that. But how that all came about was the words of Abdu'l-Baha, the words of Baha'u'llah, the words from the Universal House of Justice. That to me was really the most important thing. How do we make sure that I'm doing the right thing? And so I would think about this quote, this hidden word, because remember, I'm working in a Black community where kids are facing all kind of trauma. I remember one time in an auditorium with my older kids, I said, how many of you have heard gunshots in your neighborhood? 90% of the kids raised their hand, about 100 or so kids. 90% of the kids raised their hand. How many of you know someone's been shot? Half the hands go up. How many of you have been involved in a violent crime yourself? No hands raised. No one wanted to raise their hand, but I knew things that they didn't know because I knew some kids were in trouble. I remember one kid told me one time we had to suspend him and because he happened to come to school with a knife. I said, where'd you get that knife? He said, man, I forgot to put it where I needed to put it. I said, well, what do you mean you forgot to put it where you need to put it? He said, I usually put it in the bushes coming to school, and I pick it up when I go back to school, back home. I said, what do you do that for? And I'll never forget these words. It's these little things. He said, Mr. Andrews, you don't live by my way. I'll never forget you don't live by my way. I still had to do them. I still had to. And there was a picture in my office. And I remember showing him this picture from the Black Men's Gathering. And I pointed out different individuals in that picture and the little things that I learned from them that I wanted to pass on to him and to all the children. That they needed to understand there is a future in your life. And I also pointed out brothers who had been incarcerated, who had turned their lives around, brothers who had been shot, who had turned their lives around because of the words of Baha'u'llah. And then I remember this one hidden word. O Son of Spirit, the best beloved of all things in my sight is justice. Turn not away therefrom if thou desirest me, and neglect it not that I may confide in thee. Be its aid thou shalt see through thine own eyes, and not through the eyes of others, and shall not thy own knowledge, and not through the knowledge of thy neighbor. Ponder in this heart how behooveth it to be. Verily, justice is my gift to thee in my loving kindness. I had this in my office because our children, our lovely children, they were looking for justice as well. Not just the men, not just the women. They were looking for justice as well. And so we created a situation where, and I just want to tell this little side story about the gathering and the school. So I'd go to the gathering and I'd come back to the school. Gathering was in July, and in August, we'd had our orientation and our plannings. And so I'd come back and say, you know, I'm going to be reading this thing from the Black Men's Gathering, and I want you to, try to lift the spirits and set the tone. So I do that after a few years. And then I turn the planning on the team. And so they'd come to plan. So, well, what are the plans? And he said, well, you're going to do your thing, and you're going to do your Baha'i thing, and you're going to talk about the Black Men's Gathering, right? I said, yeah. And then it just, part of their planning was to include, they wanted to make sure I had something from the Black Men's Gathering to kick off the year, whether it's music, whether it's some poetry, whether it's something I heard, whether it was a writing. Remember, this is a public school, and they wanted to hear the words from the Black Men's Gathering. And they were always inspired. It wasn't me, it was them. I played songs from, whether it's Jamie or Walter Heath. And I'd play these songs and what's that, the Hollow Reed, Billy? What's that song, the Hollow Reed? I play that. I'm a channel. And we talk about the channel of what we need to do to reach these children. What we need to do. And so all these children would get the peace from these teachers. Because my job was to inspire them so they could lift up these children. And there was some, you know, I learned a lot at the gathering, some brothers. And I'd see some of those. I remember Patrick saying to me about those brothers. I remember he told me those kids, man, love those kids. He talked to me about it. I'd bring those messages back. Matter of fact, I think I called Patrick one time when this kid was in trouble. I put Patrick on the phone. You need to talk to this kid. M&Ms and stuff like that. You know, I'm old school. You know, I tell you, this you learn from right from wrong. And Patrick was just so sweet to that little boy. And he remembered. He said, who's that guy? Who's that guy who talked to us? I mean, Patrick? And then I'd forget. I said, what guy? What guy? Remember I was in trouble, Mr. Andrews? And the kid you put him on the phone with? Those are the kinds of things, the little things that the BMG did for us in a very, very special way. And it's all because of what Baha'u'llah has given us. You know, that hidden word about justice. Beloved. We talk in the school a lot about love and unity. We talk at the school about the importance of what we need to do to inspire these young people to learn. And like I said before, we were the highest performing schools in the state. It's by accident. It's hard work. But we were given a playbook. We just had to call the plays and execute. It wasn't that hard. It really wasn't that hard. I just don't believe in that. And then I left the school. And I'm kind of I guess you could call me, Bill was very nice to call me an activist. I'm kind of a thug when it comes to activism.
2 minutes.
I want to be right out there. And so I started gathering these leaders together, leaders of color. And we had these gatherings at my home. And we'd carry on the same message of bringing these brothers together to inform them of the need to carry on the job that we have to do. I just want to get back to the school with one thing.
Kevin, 2 minutes.
Yep.
Kevin.
The message is this. Yep. The message is this. I won't read the message, but from the Universal House of Justice, the National Spiritual Assembly put out a message. And at the end of it, it talked about how you could succeed with the relationships and friendships and regard, and that build these pillars. And the school now has created an institute. And what they did is they took one paragraph from the statement from the National Spiritual Assembly and included that in the institute, a leadership institute that they have now put together that will bring about fellowships for 2 individuals to deal with love, unity, and justice.
Thank you very much, Kevin. Are you good? Thank you very much. Friends, you can imagine Kevin and all of us have a lot to share, a lot in our hearts to share, but our time is limited. And so now we're going to turn our attention to this other brother from California, the Bay Area, Jason Grama, who is involved with a very interesting initiative called the diversity, what is it called? The Dublin Diversity Inclusion Alliance. And so Jason Grammer, please come and share with us.
Thank you, Dr. Roberts. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Well, good morning, good afternoon, everybody from rainy Oakland, California. I bring you greetings. I'd like to kind of start off by acknowledging some folks that I've invited on the call from Dublin that may be there. I can't see who's there, but I wanted to acknowledge. Dublin, California is a city outside of San Francisco near Pleasanton, very, very near where Abdu'l-Baha visited Phoebe Hearst's summer estate. Wanted to acknowledge that. I also wanted to acknowledge my family who's on the call, and a special shout out to my parents who did service back in the 70s, and my family became Baha'is at Greenacre. And I wanted to acknowledge coming back to Greenacre and telling stories of service and you know, long-standing memory of my parents, Shirley Grammer and Herman Grammer. And everybody might remember my father and my mother throughout the United States in terms of service. So I wanted to talk about, the title of my remarks are Not by Chance, the Implementation of the Oneness of Humanity. And this has been a 2-year, going on 3-year process where we have formed an organization called the Dublin Diversity Alliance Organization. And as I tell the story about that, I wanted to talk about first, this whole process and journey has been very sacred for me and very sacred to the members who are executing with this. And I wanted to acknowledge Juan and Teddy and Kevin when they talk about this mystical journey, this sacred journey, that it's not by chance. And this is a quote from one of the founders of the Alliance, and that's Mike Karami, because Billy read at the top of the hour the quotes from the House of Justice about this mystical relationship that we're talking about in terms of doing service and action in our communities from the House of Justice. I can definitely confirm that. And if you talk to Mike, Mike would confirm it. And now he called me about 3 years ago and said, hey man, I wanted to talk about racism in the community, in my community in Dublin, and how what we can do in terms of the challenging issue. And I said, well, Mike, what are you thinking about doing? And he goes, well, I wanted to have a community meeting and start to invite the public and talk about racism and, you know, start talking about the oneness of humanity. And I said, okay. And so as a member of the BMG, I told him, I said, well, Mike, you have to know that I'm under orders. And those orders are, I have to be obedient to the House of Justice. And he went, what are you talking about? I said, well, let me tell you about the Black Men's Gathering. And after I told him the story, I looked at him and I said, Mike, I'm reporting for duty. What do you need? What do you want me to do? And so that conversation instilled a very, very close conversation. Mike is now officially my spiritual brother. He's from a Persian family. And I wanted to call out and address my remarks to folks who are not African-American, who are looking at the dynamic of talking about racism in the Baha'i community and racism outside in the general public and in the times in which we live. There is this relationship from our writings that Shoghi Effendi addresses the white to make a supreme effort to respond in their ways of rising up and talking about racism in the community. And I think that consciousness is happening in communities around the country and probably the world in that sense. And that the Negroes or the Black folks are to correspondingly respond in ways of supporting that. So Mike and I have developed this, he calls and I respond, relationship about topics related to the Alliance. And so it's a very mystical and sacred relationship that we have. And we similarly, we have this sort of connection in terms of making plans and things that happen. And when things happen, that barriers are removed or certain things occur, we just say not by chance. It's a refrain that we acknowledge the spiritual process by which we have embarked. Okay, so that was about 2-3 years ago. And so as I engaged in to meet the folks of Dublin, the community itself is going through a growth process because of the proximity to Silicon Valley, and people have moved there. A lot of immigrants, a lot of folks who are coming to the Bay Area and wanted to find some cheaper housing, et cetera. And so Dublin has been a community where a lot of people have landed. And so Mike owned a business there. He owned a mechanic shop, and I took my car there for years. And that's how we developed our relationship. And Mike has developed this, I call it spiritual currency. He didn't charge me for a lot of the work, and his way of conducting himself in the community in terms of building relationships is what I call spiritual currency. And he very popular in the community. And when Mike calls on you to do something, people tend to know that it's authentic and welcome. So as we started to focus on Dublin, he started to invite his customers, a very, very diverse set of people that started to come to the Alliance. And one of them was Regis Harvey. I'll tell the story a little bit about Regis. Regis, a brother from Southside Chicago. I have to give a shout out for those who know about Chicago. I have to give a shout out about the code of Chicago. As soon as I found out that he was from the South Side, and being raised in the South Side and living there for years, I immediately recognized that. And now Regis joined this triad of spiritual conversations between Mike and I. So we are the co-founders of the Dublin and Diversity Inclusion Alliance, and we have been operating it for 2 years. So I'll go into some details about it, but I wanted to give a special shout out to Regis and his family, who has embarked on this journey to improve his community inside of Dublin. So what the Alliance started with was what the House of Justice calls elevated conversations, and it was more about not just the business of the community. It was the business of, well, how can we start to address elimination of all prejudices? And so when we talk about elimination of all prejudice, obviously we started out between black and white, but as the Alliance started to proceed, it started talking about a wide variety of troubling, in terms of discourse, coming together and talking about very uncomfortable topics within the citizenry of Dublin. And so when we kicked this off, we would meet every month, and Regis and Mike would set the agenda, because they lived in Dublin. I live in Oakland, but I work in right across the street. My office is in Pleasanton. I work for Kaiser Permanente. So I would go over after work and meet with them on these once a month gatherings, and to help plan and steer the Alliance. So the Alliance has basically initiated a phase 1, which is basically the relationship building and dialoguing within the community. So what we would do is we would host people who showed up from the community. We would advertise it and invite personal invitations to members of the community. So it started off small, and people started to join as people started to hear about it and say, well, what goes on at this Alliance dialogue? And we would explain it. We would talk about various topics, and we would talk about them specifically to have hard and difficult conversations with people, to get beyond just the facade of, I'm not racist, or I'm my cause is about this, or my perspective. And what ensued was probably the most rich, diverse level of conversation I've ever been a participant of in the history of my living in California, for sure. But the history of my being alive, I would say that this represented, because you've got moms and daughters, you've got corporate people, you've got immigrants, you've got teachers, you've got families, you've got artists, you have a lot of youth represented, and you have other spiritual community members, members of Christian faith, and members of the Islamic faith, and of Asian faiths, etc. And also you had the elected officials. So the mayor and the city council started coming to these sessions and hearing dialogue within their citizenry about racism and what was going on. Because it wasn't an official event, they were able to participate and contribute as members of the Dublin community as well. And so this conversation went on, and what has ensued probably within, I would say, as an outcome of that, if I had to summarize the impact, is this phase was really about the neighbors to get to know each other, to build relationships. And I would say the biggest nugget has been this intimate gathering of relationships in ways that at a community level, the spiritual aspect of who people are and that connectedness is transcending what they represented originally coming from the dialogue. And I call out, just as an example, the extremes of having a Trump supporter in the conversation, along with members of the gay community in the conversation, all dialoguing and and growing and learning from each other. That was one of the biggest outcomes, is they're learning from each other because they've never heard perspectives in a way that they could relate to it. And they may read about it in the news, et cetera, but the personal relationships they started to develop in and outside of the alliance when we would meet started to happen. Children's classes, people started to support children's classes. The artists engaged and started talking about art. And then over time, everyone sort of expressed their own perspectives. And at one of our last sessions before COVID, one of Chris, I'll just call out Chris as his name, started to talk about this notion of how do you operate in oneness in a community. And I think it was an acknowledgement that, yeah, everyone has their perspective, but now how do you actually operate that way? How do you take a community gathering like that and start to build actual action plans out of that? And so that was the one of the last meetings in January that we had. And so now, over the course of COVID being impacted, we're still operating, but we're operating online. And we've hit, I would say, the next phase of where we're headed in terms of planning. And that is community building and social action. And one of our esteemed members, Phil, hopefully he's on as well. He's basically saying we need to act in ways of going into the community and building, executing our mission so that we have impact on people. And when we talk about impact, he's talking about spiritually, the vision is to connect the community spiritually in terms of learning and loving and living as one unified, prosperous community about this oneness. So now we are officially talking about the mission and executing on the mission and drafting implementation approaches. So the implementation has hit phase 2, where we're going to actually take approaches where we start to practice oneness. So Chris talked about, well, how do you operate as one? So now we're going to build practices toward implementing this oneness in terms of day-to-day and being very consistent and constant in terms of community action. So there are other organizations in Dublin And so these are the three, I'll call out the three implementation approaches that we're talking about: learning and gaining experience, building community capacity. And this is the continuation of the dialogue. Obviously, we still have to continue that because there are a lot of nuggets that come out of that expression of individual members of the community in ways that we can direct some of that. And there's a lot of healing that has to happen. There are a lot of people who are hurt. There are a lot of people who have been affected by the events in the country, and they need a space. And I forgot to mention that this is now officially a safe space for people to come and feel welcome to express that and to share that and share their own personal lives about what's going on with them in their own situation. And so out of this, we have also started to engage like-minded community-based organizations that we can connect with. And we're collaborating with, there's a Black Men's Gathering in Dublin that Phil leads, is part of, and Regis is part of that as well. And Phil just texted me this week, he wants me to come speak, and we're gonna consult on topics on what to speak about. I cannot wait to have that conversation with Phil, because the BMG spirit, get ready folks, it's gonna hit. And it's gonna be some straight talk about some spiritual concepts, etc. So the second approach is to hold ourselves accountable. So this is a long-standing sort of accountability of when people start talking about initiatives. How do you sustain the initiative, and how do you keep it going, and how do you hold yourself accountable to it? So people are calling us out like, okay, where's the alliance? What happened to the alliance? And so we're going to hold ourselves accountable and be able to engage and operate within the mission, and stay on mission and stay on the vision, so that we have impacts and celebrate obviously what we will have impacts with. And then we will pursue the oneness of mankind. So the agreement of the alliance in the last meeting that I mentioned with Chris is, what does the culture of oneness really look like? What is that oneness principle that, Baha'is, we talk about the oneness of the human race, but there are other perspectives that we have to welcome and engage with within other faith-based communities, with other citizenry, so that oneness is really expressed in this wholeness and in this diverse way. So that's specifically what we're going to talk about. So these are the three things that I mentioned that we're focused on in terms of approaches. Now, the last comment I want to make, and I'll turn it over back to Dr. Roberts, is how do you implement an action plan inside of that and provide resources and training to build capacity, to hold yourself accountable, and pursue the oneness of mankind? How do you do that? And so this is where the Institute process is coming in. So we are chartering on providing services inside of that. So we're implementing on the charter a module called Life of the Spirit. And I won't mention that it's part of the Ruhi Institute. I would just say it is the content and the practices that we will use will be resources that we will provide to basically change behavior, because the trainings and collaboration around this action plan is to train the community to act in oneness. Because you can sit there and talk, we have a dialogue about it, but how do people act? That's really what the Alliance wants. They want tools, techniques, ways of actually operating that way, so that their behavior aligns with being a citizen in Dublin and aligns with the goals of the Alliance, in terms of changing their behavior spiritually is what the goal will be and what the outcomes are focused on. So that, I know that's kind of an overview of the Alliance. We do have a website. I did want to mention that because we stood this up, I've been engaging communities all over the country. And I'm waiting on one to engage in Dubai about this kind of construct. Someone reached out to me about that, but we've engaged people in Oakland, we've engaged San Jose, we've engaged Palo Alto. Mark Tofig down in Palo Alto invited us to talk. Bob Henderson in San Jose. and obviously Oakland, where I'm located. So that's the plan in the next, as we enter the end of the formative age in the Baha'i faith, but as we enter more community building, social action phase, we are now focused on implementing practices and getting people engaged to actually help people change behavior spiritually to act in terms of the oneness of mankind implementation. So God bless. Thank you very much for the opportunity. Turn it back to you, Dr. Roberts.
Thank you very much, Jason. Thank you to each one of you. These brothers I love so much and admire really their service. And I just have to mention that Kevin mentioned that his brothers, his son, his nephew are all have these various roles they're serving in the faith or have served in the faith. But what you need to also remember is that Kevin was the first member of the Baha'i faith in his family. And so he sort of began that spiritual legacy. Now, friends, gosh, our time is just flown. So we certainly will do understand if you have to excuse yourself. But we now are going to open the floor for questions. And I think we're going to probably go for another half hour or so. So just heads up and just warn you, just to give people a chance to ask any questions they have. But I'll just take this moment now to thank each one of you for participating. And if you have to leave, we certainly understand. It's been a wonderful, wonderful opportunity to share the spirit of the gathering and how it's still vibrant and alive and influencing the work of many, many people. So Jessica, are you there? And are you going to help us with some questions that people have?
Yes, I am. It would be my pleasure. Okay, so first we have a question from Linwood Billingsley. I'm going to unmute them.
We call Linwood Jamal, but please.
Jamal, all right.
Jamal, yes.
I was really excited about this this particular one on community building. And I don't know, it's not a question for anybody in particular, but maybe people from LA maybe can answer this. But myself being involved with the activities and listen, really my question comes from the June 22nd letter where it talks about working in groups and not expecting too much. Kevin mentioned one thing about doing the right thing. So that's right. We got to get these questions. My question is, how do you act, in these spontaneous situations, where we know that the ultimate goal is unity, and there might be a lot of disunity, and the letter tells us to be, Baha'i-like, when we're doing our activities. I guess my question is, how do we react in those situations? How would you react in, spontaneous, particularly with the racial demonstrations and the those kind of things right today?
Jamal, where were you directing that question to whom?
I didn't have nobody in particular. I was thinking perhaps people up in LA, they might be able to answer.
So please, Juan or Teddy, please.
When you say spontaneous, you're saying spontaneous actions, spontaneous relationships.
Some of the issues that are going on now, particularly Floyd, police brutality, and the pandemic, and all these things, that are happening now. I guess because I'm involved with some activity in my community, and I try to be on this letter was really helpful. The July 22nd was helpful because it made me realize, that we can't expect to achieve Baha'u'llah's ultimate goal in these processes, but what we expect is should be that and within reason.
No, I think that's a great question, and something that I recently have been trying to come to terms with. Considering everything that has been playing out lately. But I was having a conversation with the Baha'i brother a couple of days ago about that very thing, and that that, you know, there are people who choose to spend their time 100% of their time, you know, attacking oil ships and chaining themselves to trees and so forth. And there are people who spend 100% of their time doing nonsense. So the question is, how are you going to spend the bulk of your time, and what philosophy are you basing the allocation of that time on? So as a Baha'i, I want to spend my time doing what the House of Justice is asking us to do, with an understanding that they do give us, I like to call it an out. They say, if you feel compelled to do some of these other things, then by all means, go ahead and do them. And so when there were protests out here, you know, personally, I participated in, and I went out there one day because I felt compelled to do that. I felt compelled to show that solidarity and brotherhood, and to let them know that I was there, to let them know that I was there. But I choose to spend the bulk of my time, and I don't want to create a false dichotomy, but right now in my life, I spend the bulk of my time engaged in things that are core activity-esque: children's classes, junior youth groups, devotional gatherings, study circles. And that same brother and I talked about sort of this 80-20 thing, or 90-10 thing, where I'm going to spend the bulk of my time doing this, but if I'm being pulled in another direction in a way that I feel that I'm not really controlling, then I'm going to honor that and at least check it out and see why I'm being pulled in that direction. But again, I don't want to create a false dichotomy, because doing some of those, being engaged in some of those activities that aren't Baha'i centered, it's all one. It's all one. It's all together. But as Baha'is, I choose to walk the world in a certain way, and for me, that's centered in the core activities that the House of Justice have given us.
Thank you. Juan, did you want to add something to that?
Yeah, you know, thank you for the question. In particular, when you are, for our gathering in particular, when we are having spontaneous conversation around a heated subject, we have set up very specific parameters in that, you know, we make it known that you are sharing your opinion, your thoughts, that you're not trying to get somebody to come over to your side to prescribe to your way of thinking and belief. And we also, when choosing, you know, and inviting someone into the space, we let them know that, you know, we say, hey man, you know, take the wording right out of it. You know, this approach to these topics when it comes to conflict and contention are not serving us. We see that these systems are broken. So how can we replace it with love and unity? And are you willing to engage in a conversation where we challenge ourselves to bring our higher natures to these conversations? So that being said, when something happens and there's a you know, police brutality and another Black man loses his life, you know, to law enforcement, one of the brothers who happens to be a friend of the faith, you know, there was people that on this call that were ready to burn buildings down. There was people on this call that were deeply hurt and saddened. There was people on this call, you know, and then there was this voice that emerged, and it was only one mainly, but it was a Baha'i brother who expressed optimism. And what we realized is the very next week that optimism would have been trending if we were in a social media setting from amongst all the brothers on that phone call. So that when we shine a light on some truth in our group, and men are open and present and their hearts are open, even if they're sharing their hurts and their anger, that it cannot but have an effect on people's souls and their hearts and their way of seeing. And so that's, you know, when those things happen spontaneously, we also, you know, just remind, you know, having a facilitator that can, you know, hey, you have 2 more minutes, Kevin. Or, you know.
Thank you very much, Juan. Thank you very much. Jessica, do you have the next question?
Yes, our next question's coming from Frank, who's going to come on in.
Hello, gentlemen, and thank you so much. Initially, this question was for Juan and Teddy, but I think it can be for the entire panel if there's time. Juan, you mentioned the number 45 core activities, and we're told it's not just about the number, but as our numbers increase, we see a change in culture. So I'm curious if you could speak to a change in what changes in culture are you noticing in your community? And then that led me to think, well, what's the change in culture at this charter school versus other educational places? Or what is the change in Jason, your initiative? So that's what I was curious to hear. You know, what have you seen in terms of that dynamic of the spirit changing in your community?
I can address some of that. At least what I've seen in Dublin is there's a wholeness coming together, at least in terms of when people say that they love you, or they're loving, you actually have to demonstrate it in a consistent way. And this is something that we're very conscious of in the Alliance and being supportive. So there are a lot of people who want support and want to be loved, and there are people coming to the Alliance because they're isolated in the community. And just last week, one of the members who had come had surgery, and Mike immediately responded to the Alliance and says, hey, she's having surgery. I won't mention names because of privacy, but, and she felt alone. She actually told Mike this. And so when you hear people struggling, when you're trying to really provide the betterment of your community, you actually have to demonstrate it and be consistent about it. So that's the change of culture that I see happening, because now when people do that and they see that and you demonstrate it, then they know it's real and it's authentic. And so being real and being authentic and taking action, and calling people out on BS and et cetera is all part of it. I mean, it's becoming more like a family. So if you talk cultural progression, you take stranger to friend to family, then you know what I'm talking about in terms of journey. So that's what obviously the end state is. But out of those relationships, there's going to be so much potential that you can only imagine, because you're tapping the people of the world. So it's just going to provide much more of a rich community. And I think everyone is recognizing that, at least in Dublin, that's part of the Alliance. Thanks.
Thank you very much. I think I saw a hand, Layli Maripin. Are you there? Hi, Layli.
Hey there, how are you?
Good. Please, your question.
Yeah, thank you. I've really enjoyed these last 3 days of presentations about the Black Men's Gathering, and I've been thinking a lot about how to do, more and better teaching in my community, which is Framingham, Massachusetts, which is a fairly diverse community compared to a lot of the communities around it, although it's primarily Brazilian and Latin American, but we also have a pretty significant Black population. And I'm always trying to think about how to especially engage the younger, populations of color in our neighborhoods. And I'm wondering, based on the experience of those of you who spoke today, who've given some really beautiful examples of community work, what do you think is the number one thing from the faith that would excite and affirm young Black men who have not heard of the faith ever before? What's the thing that the hearts are hankering for that the faith offers based on your experience? I mean, I could guess because I'm a Black woman, but I think that you all have some experience that I don't have, that I would just love to hear your thoughts on that subject.
Kevin, let me ask you if you'll try to respond to this.
So thank you for the question, Lily. I just think it's trust. I mean, I don't think there's anything new. I think if you've worked in the community, there's nothing really new. I think it's trust. And I think when, like I said before, it's justice. People want justice. You hear about equity around the anti-racism movement and things like that, and that's important, very important to address. But I really think it's trying to find a path to a person's heart, which is love. They've got to see what I found from the kids that I work with is they've got to see that you're real. If you're not real, and that's building relationships, it doesn't mean, oh, let me come and give you this answer. It's about building relationships. I think you've heard from all of us from the whole weekend. It's not like just a one-stop shop. It's you build relationships, people begin to trust, and from there you can really deal with any issue that they're bringing up, because you've got to be there for them when they call on you.
So let me add, Lily, add to that, and that is my experience with the gathering. And the brothers in the gathering have heard me say this often, and that is to work with brothers means you really have to love them, because you will be tested. And I think, to me, this is something that is really critical. The House of Justice has reminded us of this. You know, I think in the paragraph that I read, you know, the power to transform the world is effected by love. And love originating from the relationship with the divine, love ablaze among members of a community, love extended without restriction to every human being. This capacity to love is something that has to be learned and developed. But I tell you, people respond to it. And particularly in the population you're talking about, which is Black men, really respond to this, but only after they truly believe it is authentic. Once one really is able to affect that and people see that, you will be amazed at how hearts turn. Let's go on to the next question. Thank you, Lily, for yours. Jessica, do you have something? I see a lot of hands being raised and other people wanting to. So you have another question?
Yes. This question comes from Sue. It says,
this is Sue who? Sue who?
Sue Emmel.
Sue Emmel. Hi, Sue Emmel.
What do you need in the Baha'i community at large to feel as open-hearted, free-spirited, and safe as you do here, and presumably amongst your BMG brothers in general? A sense that there is still a guarded hesitation, or is it a matter of what Teddy Lawrence said, if people aren't seeing you, then you aren't making yourself visible?
Well, Teddy's disappeared on us. I don't know what happened to him. So
Teddy has another thing he has to tend to.
Let's turn to Juan. Maybe you can respond to this.
Give it to me one more time, please, Jessica. Did you lose it?
I just dismissed it. Give me 1 second. Okay. What do you need in the Baha'i community at large to feel as open-hearted, free-spirited, and safe as you do here, and presumably amongst your BMG brothers in general? A sense that there's still a guarded hesitation, or is it a matter of what Teddy Lawrence said? If people aren't seeing you, then you aren't making yourself visible.
Yeah, you know, I've been in other gatherings where brothers, you know, have expressed, or people of African descent on a whole have expressed a guarded hesitation, and it's not coming from nowhere. It's coming usually from not being heard, not being seen, opinions being disregarded. You know, when it comes to me, you know, I think we all have to do the personal work of knowing yourself and knowing what you bring and what you offer. And I think, you know, as Teddy said, his, you know, unwillingness in his personal life, or, you know, his struggle to be at the center of the focus prevented him. So he had to kind of face that personal challenge and arise, because that's what he's being asked to do by the Universal House of Justice and by this faith, you know. So yeah, I think ultimately, I think if you don't say your number, if you don't say your piece, if you don't share your truth, then how can your community benefit from it? But at the same time, you have to be in an environment that welcomes your contribution. And, you know, in greater society, you know, Dr. Ruha Benjamin gave a talk about in greater society, you know, we have this dialogue right now that's all about white supremacy and these kinds of, and how it's permeated all areas of life. And one of the things that she said is the greatest asset that we have as people of African descent is the Black imagination. That that is not just this, you know, that is an actual thing, that we are living, you know, carrying out a lot of, in a lot of industry, we're carrying out and expressing white imagination and white thought. So I just say in our communities to really allow, you know, the people in your community to give voice, and those young Black men to ask them questions and see what it is that they want to do and how they want to contribute, and then be of service to them and seeing that through and affording them the resources to do those things.
Thank you. And we can also add, not that people listening don't know this, but the various programs and initiatives that we have in the faith, making available to young people, to people of all backgrounds, are really designed to empower, spiritually empower, and enable people to really take their place and have their voices. Jessica, how about one more question? How's that?
Okay. I am gonna invite Sanam into the room to ask her question. And while I'm finding her, Juan, there have been so many people who have been asking to invite their nephew, their brother into your group. And how do they do that? How do they contact you?
So, you know, in the bylaws of our group, if you would, one of the ways to enter the group is through a current member, because we're growing this organically, you know, and what we're doing is whoever, the current members, like I said, now we're currently at like 19, you know, when we come across someone that we feel would benefit from this group, or someone falls into our heart, then we follow up and have a discussion, so that when the people that we are inviting into the group, we know would benefit and also contribute, you know, in a certain way. That being said, if they have identified maybe key people that they feel would be suited as facilitators of a certain group like that, Teddy and I would be willing to have a discussion and try to see how we can, you know, just have a, you know, further the discussion that they can take ownership themselves.
So let me say, if someone has that interest, put your email in the chat box. It will, I will be receiving all those and make a notation of your interest, and then we'll pass it on. Okay. Please, Sanam, are you there?
Can you hear me?
Hello, Sanam.
Hello, hi, Allah Akbar. I wanted to quickly first thank Greenacre for providing this space and all the amazing souls on this panel that, you know, giving us this precious insights and knowledge and experience. Very many questions, I have to choose one or two. I wanted to ask you, we are told that Baha'i communities reflect the shortcomings of the greater community they live in. And I have lived in more than 5 countries, and from personal experience, I can attest to that. So as a Baha'i community in the United States, how do we address racism within our own community? The 3 protagonists that the House of Justice asks and summons in paragraph 4 to rise up to establish justice, those same 3 protagonists, individuals, communities, and Baha'i institutions, I have witnessed racism across, and I am searching for answers and ways how to bring this up and how to call each other to account and how to address this. Because there is not much room to really discuss the general, in my experience, in my limited experience, the attitude is that we have arrived. We are Baha'is, we have the recipe, we have the divine revelation, we know the importance of love and unity, and we know racism is not good. So then that openness to accept and admit that we manifest this shortcoming too, and we need to address it too, and we need to rise to establish these just relationships. How do we go about that? Thank you.
So I'm going to ask Kevin if you'll try to respond to this, and maybe I'll have a word to add afterwards. Kevin?
So in Newton, we actually have had these conversations. I live in a primarily white community, a large Persian community, and we've invited people to have conversations with us around the issues of race. And Billy always said this. I'd call him sometimes and say, I heard this at the Baha'i gathering, and there would be this discussion. I said, but I don't remember that. And he said, always go back to the writings. Always go back to the writings. And so I think, as I said earlier, the writings give us the playbook. All we have to do is look at what the writings are saying and apply that to our daily life, and then answer these questions around racism, for example. How is that affecting us? The pupil of the eye. Black people have a responsibility. White people have a responsibility. Use the quotes from the pupil of the eye. And I think the greater community really understands that. You're seeing that more and more. So I just think, this quote always, it may not apply to this question, but it always sticks in my head. And that it says that, let your deeds, not your words, be your adorning. That sticks with me in everything that I do. And so Baha'u'llah has asked me to do something. It is my job to carry it out. One of those things he's asked me to do is to help with this issue around racism. And not just keep it within the Black community, but expand it into the other communities that it surrounds. And this is I'm a person living in a primarily white community that has a large Persian community. And I can say that our community is rising to the occasion, and really addressing this issue. We don't have all the answers. We are not going to solve racism. We are not going to solve racism, and certainly not in my lifetime. We can surely address the questions on a day-to-day basis.
Thank you very much. Sanam and everyone who's listening, you've heard the brothers from the gathering on each day talk about their fidelity to the House of Justice, the importance, how dear we hold the House of Justice. We believe, as an article of faith, that the Universal House of Justice is the source of all good, freed from all error. And so when the House of Justice speaks, we take what they say very seriously. In fact, the letters that are written by the House of Justice, we would metaphorically say, never mind to dear Baha'i friends or dear friends, put your own name there, dear Billy, so that that letter is a personal letter to you, and then read it in that light, in that context, and also frame it in your own personal context, your own situation. So I urge you, to Sanam and whoever else is listening, to go back to this gift of the House of Justice, really quite an extraordinary gift of the July 22nd, 2020 message, where they begin saying, a moment of historic portent has arrived for your nation. It is a letter to every person, every believer in the United States, regardless of background, and to study it deeply, not just to do a cursory read, but to read line by line and to consult about it with a group of friends, because in it, the House of Justice gives a series of steps and a series of instructions that really will be exactly the response that you're looking for, how to go about this challenging process, what to anticipate and what we can look forward to, and also how to position ourselves in response to what is a very difficult and thorny problem that has been with us for a while and looks like it's going to be with us for a while. But the part that we will play in the amelioration of these problems, these challenges. Look, friends, it's been really wonderful to be with you. And I cannot express my admiration for each one of the brothers that came on to make these presentations, really sharing their hearts, exposing vulnerabilities, and really talking deeply about their experience in the gathering, and then how they have taken that and processed it and used it to really demonstrate it in the larger world, in the outward world, the qualities of faith and the learnings that we have experienced. And I'm so happy and so proud, and so I'm really filled with admiration for each one of them, and I express my gratitude. Thank you to Greenacre for giving us the opportunity to share these experiences and to let you know the vibrancy of the gathering is alive and well. And I've made some promises to you. You will hear from me, and I will keep those promises. Now let me turn, we're going to play a little piece of music following some comments from the Greenacre team. Greenacre, thank you again. Bye, everybody.
Well, it's that bittersweet moment, because from the correspondence we've been getting and the comments, no one wants these sessions to end. and these sessions have been such a leaven to the spirit and soul for all those who are here, and they are being recorded. They will be shared next week, and so they will live on. And I was thinking, I have to do some research, because I don't know if this is historic, because I was wondering, has there ever been 3 plenary sessions at Greenacre where the presenters were all Black men? We'll have to look into that, but I was pondering this before we started today. And although Greenacre hosted the space, Dr. Roberts did the lion's share of the work and got these panelists together who prepared, shared their soul and spirit, and gave us this glimpse of the gathering. So we had the easy part, and we partook as much as the audience. We've been talking to each other. How do we do effective programming based on what we've seen over the last 3 days? Billy's use of music and keeping people to time and who he selects.
Serious devotions.
Yeah, serious devotions. No, but seriously, we have been consulting as a result of this. So with that, I'd like to just thank you so much and turn it back to Dr. Roberts to close with some song.
Again, just a reminder, if you're interested in the music, because I see somebody's writing that, please put your email and a reference to it in the chat box. We will get it, and you'll be hearing from me shortly. Friends, again, thank you very much. But I'm now going to play a piece of music that I think you might love to hear.
Let's all Lord our homeland, Africa, so that she may waken from her sleep, fill her horn with plenty, guide her feet. Hear us, faithful ones, hear us, faithful ones. Spirit descend, Spirit, Spirit, Spirit descend, Spirit, Spirit, Spirit descend, Spirit divine. Bless, O Lord, our homeland, Africa, so that she may waken from her sleep. Fill her horn with plenty, guide her feet. Hear us, faithful ones, hear us, faithful ones. Spirit descend, Spirit, Spirit, Spirit descend. Spirit, Spirit, Spirit descend, Spirit divine. Bwana ibariki Afrika, ili ipate kuamka, maombi yetu yasikele. Bariki, bariki, uje raho, uje, uje, uje raho, uje, uje, Ujeraho, Ujeraho, Utujazi. Bless, oh Lord, our homeland, Africa.
Thank you very much, friends. Such a pleasure being with you.
Hi, brothers.